Everybody, I'm Andrarchy, Head of Communications for Steemit, and I'm here with Justin, Steemit's Head of Engineering, and Vandenberg, Steemit's Senior Blockchain Engineer. Today, we're going to talk about the recent Steem hard forks, future hard forks, Steem communities, and smart media tokens. So let's start with the recent hard forks. Justin, what went well with the recent hard forks? What's the good news?
Well, it happened. For one, especially in regards to the economic changes that we made, those seem to be making a positive impact at this point. And not so much reported by us, but more reported by the community as the benchmark for that. A lot of people have been returning that have been gone for a long time. We're seeing a lot more manual curation happening. There have been a lot of changes to the trending page and a lot less malicious bot activity. So far, I know it's really early on to really say, but so far it's looking very positive. So that's great. The other thing that we have now is the Steem proposal system, which is now functional, and we have an interface in the Steemit wallet that you can go and vote on proposals for. So now the blockchain actually pays to improve itself, which I think is really a revolutionary feature. So I think that's what went well.
Michael, you get the fun job. What went wrong?
So we essentially had two problems with the release, both of which caused halts in the blockchain. And so for those that aren't aware, we have certain checks in the code of the blockchain that are validating values, is making sure that everything looks reasonable. And if something unexpected shows up, we halt block production. This is a really important security feature that prevents the blockchain from continuing production of new blocks with this bad data already in it. So that it gives us the time to dig in and look at what happened, what went wrong, and come up with a fix without having to roll back the chain. So the two problems we had, one is what we call an integer overflow. So all numbers in C++ are a fixed number of bits, and our calculations needed one more bit than we had access to. And so that caused the values to be completely wrong, and caused certain operations to fail and cause the halt of the blockchain. So this one has happened before in other blockchains. It's a fairly common bug. It is one that we should have caught. We had slightly underestimated the size of the largest account holders, how much Steem they had. And so like I said, we should have caught it, but it is a fairly common bug. Overflow, either through integer or buffer overflows, is one of the most common security vulnerabilities in almost all software. So we'd like to catch these, but they're very common and sometimes really tricky to catch. And thankfully, the blockchain reacted in the best possible way by preventing those operations from being included, allowing us to fix the problem and get a release out to everybody and move forward as though those transactions had never happened, because they're not included anymore. The second bug was a lot trickier. As many people know, we changed from linear rewards to convergent linear in this hard fork. And along with that, we also updated the curation rewards curve to match the content rewards curve. There are some very key relationships between those two curves. And so whenever we update one, we have to update the other. And the problem itself was the curation rewards curve ended up not being monotonically increasing essentially by one. And so monotonically increasing is if I were to essentially graph that function on a chart, it's always going up and to the right. And this one had just a tiny little spot where it dipped. And that led to a violation of some assumptions of how that curve worked, and led to the blockchain attempting to pay out a curator approximately 2 trillion Steem. And as soon as it tried to do that, everything broke, it stopped. That user did not receive that Steem, and we were able to fix that problem, and everything is now operating as normally. And this one was much trickier to solve even while I was debugging it when the chain was down. The values that halted the chain were the only ones that in that amount of time I could find that actually exhibited this behavior. So it would have been very difficult for us to discover that during testing. And thankfully the blockchain acted as we wanted to, and gave us the opportunity to fix the problem before it became a really bad problem.
So could you tell us maybe a little about what you've done since the problems to ensure that no other bugs like this are still lurking in the code someplace, and maybe what you have planned going forward to make sure that no bugs like this make their way into the code going forward?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when we released Hardfork 22, as part of that, we went through all of the changes that had been made for Hardfork 21. And anywhere that an overflow of this type could occur via multiplication with user vesting shares or Steem power, we ensured that they were all using larger integers to prevent the overflow. And as we're developing SMTs, we are also auditing all of the SMT code where the similar calculations for SMT power is being done. Whether we think those values might overflow or not, we are going to be doing that math using 128-bit integers rather than 64-bit integers to guarantee once and for all that these types of overflows cannot happen.
Great. So now that we've got the not fun stuff out of the way, let's put Hardforks 21 and 22 behind us, and let's shift gears to talk about the fun stuff that we're working on, the stuff we've been trying to get out for a long time, or trying to get to for a long time: communities and smart media tokens. Justin, what kind of timeline are we looking at for the rollout of communities?
So as far as a timeline for that, there's the short answer and the long answer, but I'm going to start with the long answer. So the long answer is the back end work. The majority of the back end work in HiveMind has actually been completed, which is really great to be over the hill on that. We've started implementing the front end pieces in Condenser at this point. We're picking that off bit by bit, adding in bite-sized pieces like every other day. We're seeing a new feature add into that. As far as an actual timeline, we're looking at probably 2 to 3 more weeks before we can really internally start testing it, before we have like a tangible thing that's complete that we can look at, and probably 6 weeks to 2 months before we can have the community actually take a look on maybe a test net and see those things live. That might be a little ambitious, but we feel fairly confident that we can probably hit those dates. With that being said, we don't actually have an official release date for those things.
We're trying to let Roadscape move as fast as possible with the development of communities. And I think that's what makes putting a hard date on it hard. But internally, I think something interesting is just seeing how excited he is about the work he's doing, how much work he's doing, and how rapid the progress is. So the fact that we don't have hard deadlines on this, in this particular case, is almost a good thing, because he's moving so fast that we can't really say for sure, but it's looking like soon for a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, agreed 100%.
Do you think you could talk a little bit about, a lot of people are still proposing kind of tweaks to Condenser to make the experience on Steemit.com a little better, content discovery a little bit better. And I think internally, when we look at a lot of these suggestions, it's not that we don't think that they're good ideas, but it's just that it turns out that a lot of the work that we're doing on communities kind of interferes with those ideas and makes it so that it makes more sense to integrate solutions like that after communities are rolled out. Could you explain a little bit about why these seemingly unrelated things tie into one another?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing you mentioned there was content discovery. And we firmly believe that content discovery is one of the biggest problems that we have on Steemit.com today. There's a lot of really great content out there, but it's actually fairly difficult to find it. And even further, it's difficult to find content that you yourself might actually be interested in. And that's really the overall problem that we're kind of solving with communities. So with that being said, the user experience will probably drastically change with communities. So when people are making these suggestions for minor improvements for Steemit.com today, they may not be as relevant or actually fit into that plan. From the technical side of things, we're actually changing a lot of the rendering logic in Condenser right now for communities. So it wouldn't make sense to change those things now before we get to this next step. More than likely, what it'll probably look like with the finished product is when you land at Steemit.com, probably the first thing you'll see is a list of communities that you've subscribed to, or in other words, content that you actually want to see on a regular basis, instead of being presented with maybe the trending page. I'm sure the trending page will still always have its place. People always want to see what the most rewarded content is on Steem, but that may not be the most relevant piece to everyone landing at Steemit.com in the future.
Along with communities, our other top priority is smart media tokens. Michael, what can you tell us about the timeline for those?
So the timeline on smart media tokens is really positive right now. We've been, every week we've been releasing a burn up, trying to give an update to the community as what we did that week, where we're at. And we're looking at probably a late September to early October release of our first public testnet for SMTs. We're finishing up the final issues right now. I think there's like 8 issues left. So that list is getting really short. The number of features still needing to be implemented is small. And we're really excited to get that out there.
So could you tell us a little bit about why the testnet is a big deal? How is that useful to people?
So the testnet is, specifically for SMTs, is useful for a variety of reasons. For us at Steemit, it's extraordinarily useful because it allows us to begin using SMTs in a live environment. There's a lot of different ways you can configure your SMTs, and we are trying to test as many of those options as we possibly can with unit tests, but there's simply far more combinations than we can reasonably test. And so getting that in the hands of our users and allowing them to begin creating SMTs on the testnet is going to allow us to test far more configurations more efficiently than we possibly could on our own. It'll also allow us to begin working with our developer community to make sure that our client libraries are up to date, that our devs can interface with SMTs in the way that they expect to. We kind of expect that we're going to be making API tweaks and changes just to to give our devs all the tools that they want to be able to use SMTs in the way they want to use them. So this is going to be a really good time of just back and forth between us and our community of developers, making sure that we're delivering a product that they want to use and that is easiest for them to use. And furthermore, we also are hoping that this testnet will be a time where the businesses that are interested in creating SMTs for themselves will begin playing around on the testnet, that they'll get used to how SMTs work, what the different options are, familiarize themselves with SMTs hands-on rather than just the white paper. And that way, when SMTs finally go live on the mainnet, there will already be businesses that are ready to launch SMTs, begin integrating them with their products, and everybody will be able to begin enjoying those immediately without having to wait more months for these businesses to figure out how they're going to use SMTs and actually integrate them.
Speaking of mainnet, once the testnet is released, what does that mean as far as a timeline for the release of the mainnet?
So as far as a mainnet release it'll happen when it's ready. SMTs are by far the most extensive changes we've ever made to the Steem blockchain and the protocol. Almost every single core system that exists in Steem is having to be either expanded or redone to support SMTs. So this is not a hard fork. We don't take any hard fork lightly, but this one is by far the most important one for us to get right, because there's just so much that is changing. And so as opposed to previous hard forks, we're looking at probably at least a 3-month testnet time, just because we expect that there's going to be a lot more back and forth between us and our community of developers than we've had on previous forks. In addition, we just had a hard fork, less than a month ago, and we don't want to hard fork too often because it is there are costs to forking. Everybody that's running a node needs to update. Our witnesses, our exchanges, ourselves, the seed nodes, everybody needs to be ready for it. And if we hard fork too often, that becomes really an undesirable burden on everyone. And so we both want to make sure that SMTs are ready to go. I mean, as soon as they are ready, we will probably want to hard fork as relatively quickly, just because it doesn't pay to sit on code that is ready to go. But at the same time, we need to balance not hard forking too quickly. So I can't say for sure when the SMT hard fork will actually take place. If I had to guess, it would probably either be like mid to late Q1 of 2020 or early Q2. So probably somewhere between February and April would be my guess. Like that's what my gut says is probably when it's going to happen. But a lot of things might change when we start testing it, and we're not going to commit to a specific date because SMTs need to deliver the best possible experience that we can, and we're not going to deliver a subpar SMT implementation.
Yeah, and I think most community members would agree with you on that, especially after these last hard forks. All right, guys. So thanks so much for answering these really important questions. And for all of you watching or listening to the show, please leave any questions you want us to answer in the future in the comments section of the companion article on Steemit.com.